Welcome back to another episode of the Vet Worthwhile podcast. I am James Yost, partner and wealth advisor at SignatureFD, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Travis York, owner of 3-1 Advisors. Travis, how are you?
I'm doing great today, James. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Welcome back to the Vet Worthwhile podcast. James Yost, Travis York, as always. We are super excited to bring you all a very special guest for today's episode. It is an old friend of mine, Rennie Curran. Rennie is a former professional athlete who serves as an active keynote speaker. He's authored several books. He's the CEO of Game Changer Coaching. Recently, he was inducted into the Gwinnett County Sports Hall of Fame, Georgia, Florida Hall of Fame, where he was a 3-time All-American at UGA 40 under 40, and currently he's using his platform to inspire students, athletes, business leaders to reach their fullest potential. Rennie, welcome to the Vet Worthwhile podcast.
James, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you being here. So we're going to cover a lot today, Ren. One of the things we wanted to touch on is just your transition from the sports world to the business world and what really inspired you to pursue entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that inspired me as I think about my transition going from the sports world to the business world really was empathy. You know, as I was transitioning, man, and going through the different steps and processes of trying to reevaluate my life and my next steps and just how I was going to add value to the business world, I immediately had to think outside of the box in terms of like, who can I impact? How can I add value? Who's in a similar position as me that, that I can really, really help? And that's where it started. You know, it wasn't about me just getting my feet wet, going out and speaking or starting to coach or any of that. It was really like, how can I take my past and the skills and the experiences and the lessons and the principles and apply it to another space or another person and be able to help them reach their goals and reach their dreams. There's several quotes that talk about how if you help somebody else be successful, like naturally you're going to be successful as well. And so that was my mindset. That was my thinking. And it didn't happen the way that I wanted to. You know, I didn't play that 10-year career and ride off into the sunset like a lot of athletes. I actually ended up getting cut after my second year. And so I was in that place of desperation, a place where I didn't know what was going to happen. I was in a place of being in a no man's land, a midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And so
let's hope it wasn't a midlife crisis at 22, Rennie. That would
22.
You're making Travis feel old now, Ren.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous because if that's a midlife crisis, then I'm at like the end of my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you think about when you think about a professional athlete or somebody who's like in an entertainment space. But really, our careers are so accelerated because of the fact that it's so short. You know, it's the average career span of an athlete, professional athlete, is 3 or 4 years in the NFL. And so, really, by the time if you make it to 25, 26, like you played a long career, even though it's not perceived that way. So if you get cut early on, you know, after your second year, it really is like you're questioning what's going to happen in your life, what's going to happen next, if I'm ever going to get picked up again. And so from there is when I started writing, and I immediately started thinking about, you know, who's going to be most impacted by this. So I thought about the business owner who transitions from going to business owner to losing their business, or the person who goes from married to divorce, or the person who goes from, having a job to no job, like me. And so those were the people that I felt like I could best reach. And that's where entrepreneurship really started for me.
No, that's super exciting. I mean, and again, I think kind of, James was telling me a little bit about your story, and we were thinking about guests. And what I was really excited, to connect with you on is you may not really know a lot about our listeners. And, maybe you've coached some veterinarians along the way, but a lot of veterinarians just kind of happen into entrepreneurship, right? Like my dad was a vet, and it was like, hey, you work for a while and then you buy a hospital. Today, a lot of veterinarians end up inside of a hospital where maybe they don't feel great about the culture. They're like, hang on, I want to do it this way. But they're like, okay, I'll go start my own hospital. And a lot of what I do is try to help them build a plan. But like, there's not a lot of like, hey, okay, here is courses or training or expertise on leadership. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about kind of, sounds like you maybe happened into entrepreneurship. Then how did you like take maybe the leadership skills that are prevalent in sports and then apply that to what you were doing? And how do you kind of get into that mindset of starting to be intentional around a leadership and intentional in having people look at you as kind of the guiding light?
Yeah, that was a lot to cover and everything. But the first thing I'll say is you got to understand that leadership is a process. Just like entrepreneurship is a process and it doesn't happen overnight, leadership is the same way. It's you have to be in the mindset of constantly evolving. And one of the things that helped me, because it was extremely tough early on, one of the things that really helped me was reshaping my perspective and understanding that like I was not going to be at the pro level in my first 2 to 3 years, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to athletes all the time, I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. So whether I'm working with an athlete who's transitioning or whether I'm working with an entrepreneur who's trying to like clarify their personal brand, the first thing I tell them is, hey, like for an athlete, think about where you were in your first year of literally whatever sport you play. Insert baseball, football. You didn't know what position you're going to be. You didn't know the techniques, but you got out there, you were coachable, you were humble, and you got the reps.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing for somebody who's trying to clarify their personal brand or build their business. Like, think about any business that's successful, Facebook, whatever tagline you want to use. How they look today is not how they looked in year one or version 1.1 or version 1.2. So the first thing is like setting the right expectations and the right mindset. And that's what I had to do as part of my journey when it came to like taking my skills and applying it to the business world and everything. So once I set that stage, it allowed me to not beat myself up. It allowed me to be open to new forms of learning, new concepts, new principles. But then it also let me know too that I had things from my past, and I don't call it transition anymore. I call it integration. So it also reminded me too that I had things that I could use and tweak a little bit and apply to my new life or my new position. So by that I mean, with me playing linebacker, there are certain things that I did that allowed me to be successful that could apply to the business world. So it's about extracting those skill sets and those transferable assets that I could apply. So that was another big step. Like, what do I already have in my tool belt? So for me, it was lots of reps of leadership, lots of reps of change management, lots of experiences there, understanding teamwork, having an itinerary. I mean, so many things. Culture was a big part of why my teams were successful. If I was on a team where everybody cared about each other, we communicated well, that we knew the coaches cared about us, in terms of leadership, 9 times out of 10, we were more successful than when everybody was out there just playing for themselves. So there was so many things that I could take with me and apply. And that's what I had to do. I had to do a self-inventory and really look at the skills and the things that I had to add value.
Rennie, you said something there that's like super interesting to me. Maybe just like dive in a little bit, right? Like,
yeah.
Experience in like locker rooms and coaches and environments where everybody was playing for themselves versus experiences where, like everybody's caring about everybody and, kind of that like rising tide floats all boats at like a higher level. Right.
Right.
I guess, can you just talk about like how maybe you've worked with some people or examples where, you've helped people like really build that culture of empathy?
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's a process. Like, a lot of what I do with the clients I work with now, because it started as speaking and then eventually went to coaching. Now it's more so consulting. And a lot of what I do is help them even just become aware of what their current culture is. So whether it's doing surveys, whether it's sitting down and actually assessing, like, what are their current policies? How is their even down to like how their organization is set up, like in terms of the layout, because naturally, if you're organization is set up in a certain way, it naturally may create silos, for example. So, and that was the beautiful thing about when we played. It's like we're all in the locker room. There's no, offense, defense. You're right next to each other. So the opportunities for collaboration are always happening. But in companies, like a lot of times the way that they're set up, you have cliques that naturally form. Like I said, silos that naturally form. So those are some of the things that I help companies become aware of. Is just, where's the current status of their culture? How's their setup? How do they operate? And is that conducive to creating the culture that they want and the type of leadership and not only recruiting the talent that they want, but also retaining the type of talent that they want as well?
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, and gonna kind of draw some parallels here. I mean, I've been watching you, Rennie, since you were probably like 10 or 12 years old, but I've been seeing all the success, all of the great stuff that you were able to achieve on the football field and then also as a professional. But I'm sure that came with setbacks. In veterinary hospitals, I mean, we can see with our clients, I mean, they're successful financially, but obviously day to day, there's so much work that goes into it. There's a lot of setbacks. What are some of the obstacles that you face in your career and entrepreneurial journey, and like, how do you navigate through that? What gets you through? Because I've always seen you just continue to persevere, continue to like elevate your game. How do you do that in the face of all these different obstacles?
Man, number one is having that growth mindset. And it goes back to what I said before. Just remember, man, that, it took me 1,000,000 reps to get to the pros. Yeah. And so it's going to be the same thing in business. I have to wake up every single day. And just like I got out on that football field and expected to win, and if I got knocked down by offensive lineman or laid out by a wide receiver, I got back up. It's the same exact thing in business. And that's the beauty of it. Is like, when I think about that experience, everything I went through, man, from being called too short, everything I experienced from, failing in the weight room repeatedly and having to get back the next day and still have to train and have that same enthusiasm, or not becoming a starter when I wanted to. All those things apply to business, man. And so for me, when I became an entrepreneur, it was hearing no after no after no early on. Like, a lot of people see my success and the clients I'm speaking to now, but man, 5 years ago, it did not look like that. I was going to a small town, one street light town, and going to any school I could find. And it was really just that perseverance and the constant learning, constant growth. And that was the first thing. The second thing that really has helped me to navigate these tough times is having the right team. And by team, I mean having mentors around me, having people that I could sit down with who were 10 years ahead of me, that had the blueprint, that were already successful in the position that I wanted to be in, and picking their brain, or what I call eating their crumbs. So that means if they couldn't, if they had an engagement, if they had a client that they couldn't pay them enough, I was eating their crumbs. I was saying, yes, I'll take that. I'll gladly take that. So a lot of those, those opportunities came, I took them, I just showed up, I said yes. And that opportunity is what led to my greatest breakthrough. So I'm super thankful when I look back at the adversity that I faced, man. I wouldn't be here without it.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Travis.
Like, you talked about like that breakthrough, like for you and like the entrepreneurial journey and kind of building the company. Was it like one aha moment? Like, wow, I got one big crumb and that crumb ended up being like a huge opportunity? Or was it like, just like, I'm a baseball guy. Was it just like hitting single after single after single, and the next thing you know, you look up the scoreboard and you scored, 18 runs?
It was single after single after single. And, this is something I think about all the time, but some of those, and I call it not singles, I call it planting seeds. So it's the little things, man. And when we think about business, or when we think about leadership, and we think about culture, these things happen in the smallest little details. Like, the progress that you're making happen in the smallest ways. And a lot of times you don't even notice it, or you don't value it at that time that it's happening. And what I mean by that is, I'm being blessed and getting opportunities for things that I did 10 years ago from people that I knew in high school that I treated them right, or somebody who I met at Georgia who I took the time to stop and talk to their child. And now we're at the business deal table, and they're cutting me a check and bringing me into the company because of how I treated their kid, just little things like that. And so everything mattered, and it really, really made a huge difference. And where I'm at now, it was, like I said, showing up to the nonprofit that couldn't pay me anything, but one person was in the room that was a business owner, that opportunity turned into something great, because I didn't approach that opportunity based off of the money. I approached it based off the principle of like just showing up, doing the right thing, approaching it as if I was being paid $1 million, just operating at the level, I call it operating at the level of my vision, man, not allowing my circumstances to dictate how dedicated I was going to be, how hard I was going to go, the effort I was going to put forth. And it pays off. I just genuinely believe that. And then being a person of value, that's been something that's really been huge, and something that I think about when I think about planting seeds is, if you have a client, right, that maybe they can't afford you, maybe they can't do anything for you at that time, but you connect them to somebody else that can help them. If that opportunity comes up for them to help you, or if they're in a room and everybody's talking about needing a certain service that you provide, who do you think they're going to think of first?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, man.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like you talked about several things there. I mean, there was enough there that we could dive in and do a whole episode, like showing up and getting the reps and getting experience in. And earlier you said something about just doing the right thing and trying to help people. Like, if you do all of those things, I don't care what you're doing. If you do all that and you have the work ethic, like, the success will come in time. Faster, some people faster, some slower. Everybody, there's a certain degree of luck, but like, you got to go do it. And a lot of our clients and a lot of our listeners are aspiring hospital owners. Like they see the vision of owning their own veterinary hospital, but they haven't yet taken that leap. And I think like part of the message I'm hearing from you is like, you got to invest in yourself. You got to believe in yourself, go out, do the right thing for people. And the asset of experience is building over time too, as you continue to go. Let's talk a little bit about mindset. And our hospital owners are so busy. I mean, I don't know if you have taken a pulse on pet ownership or anything, but it's been crazy the last few years. Pet ownership in America is soaring. People are willing to spend a lot on their pets. And so our clients are very, very, very busy. They're upset. Like there's a difficult blend between their business and their personal life because it all is personal. And I'm sure you understand that. Yeah. And so we were just talking earlier before we started recording, your daughter's going into high school. You have a family, you want to be there for them. You also are nurturing your clients and your business. How do you think about maintaining that winning mindset in the business while also, maintaining the same thing at the house and with your family? How do you marry those two?
Yeah, I coined the phrase, man, you got to win the game before the game. And so you got to win the game before the game. For me, that means like, what are you doing before you get to your business? What are you doing before you get to the meetings? What are you doing before you walk into the house, and you're with your family? And these things are tough, like establishing the right routines, like being proactive instead of reactive, like just really, really focusing on preparation and just how you approach your life, like being mindful, and that's something that takes a lot of work. It's not easy at all. And it's one of the biggest challenges as an entrepreneur or as a leader is like, you're trying to do all these things. For me, I was the first person in my family to ever do what I did in terms of playing football. So it's a huge sacrifice, man, that it takes so much to do. And a lot of people aren't going to understand, especially if you're the first one to do it. And as a result of it, there's a huge trade-off. The higher you climb, the more you have to do, the less time you have in terms of family, in terms of building strong relationships and so many other things. And so you really, really have to be intentional about how you approach your day to day. And that starts before, like you can't wait till you get in that moment to turn it on. It's already too late as a leader. Like you can't wait to, get in front of your team and turn it off. It's all about your preparation. It's all about, being super intentional about how you spend every single minute, all of your time. And that's something I really, really think about, not just, how I'm approaching it in terms of my schedule and how I'm spending time with my daughter, but reviewing that. So after being a student of the game, that's part of winning the game before the game too. After those moments happen, going back and reviewing, okay, how could I have improved over here? How can I be more present when I am in these moments, even if I only have 2 days? Like for me, I get my daughter every other weekend, for about three days and some change, right? So how can I make that time the most meaningful, right? Like when I'm getting ready to go to my speaking engagement, how can I make this time the most impactful? And then Sunday, is usually my day where I'm sitting down, I'm reviewing my entire week, and I'm looking for the inefficiencies. I'm looking for, how can I get just a little bit better? You start stacking those things up. You start being that proactive and that intentional and that aware on a consistent basis. And I'm telling you, it's gonna lead to a more fulfilling and more efficient life.
I just kind of follow-up question on that, right? Like, I'm assuming you've done that with people and you've seen people actually go from one place to the next. So like there is a path to actually becoming more intentional. There is a path to it's a skill set, right? It's no different than I think about I take my 9-year-old to, his pitching lessons, right? And you see progress. So that's something that is something that can happen in business for people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And it's no different, right, than if you look at finances, right? If you said, I want to have a better financial life, first thing you have to do is you have to do an inventory. You have to look at what's my current spending. What are my current habits right now? You got to get clear on that. If you don't know what you're spending and where your areas of weakness are, where you're wasting, then there's no way you can improve it. And it's the same thing with your time. It's the same thing with your relationships, with your the spiritual life, your physical life. You can break all those things down and just do a quick inventory and then start to evaluate, okay, I'm wasting over here. I'm inefficient over here. And it's the smallest changes, man, can lead to the biggest results, especially when you look at 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. That's when it really matters. I think about that so much. just you got people who are suffering from so many different ailments and pains and diseases, and right. And it didn't start there. It started 20 years ago from the little things that they did, the things that they're eating, the stress levels and just being explosive in their anger and their responses to things and it led to a certain outcome. So I try to get, my clients to understand that, hey, let's look at these routines and think about how this is going to impact you and impact everybody around you years later.
No, that's awesome.
There's I've also heard you talk about kind of two different things here that I'd love to connect how you go from one to the other, right? So
yeah.
At the athletic level, you talk about the 10,000 reps and there's Malcolm Gladwell's book and
right.
So much about hey, if you do this over and over, you just naturally become better than anybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I've also heard you talk about in your line of work now, you're not just talking about elevating the individual, but
mm-hmm.
elevating the team. Could you maybe take just a few moments to connect how the 10,000 reps that you do or the 10,000, whatever it is, from a side of elevating yourself translates
mm-hmm.
to elevating the team? Because I feel that ties back to a conversation I just had with a veterinarian, right? Where they were talking about hey, I'm going to go buy this. It's going to take a ton of time. Is that the right decision? Because I could go just work an extra 3 shifts and maybe make my life better. But how do you connect the two of hey, just working hard, but then using that hard work to elevate a team, which ultimately leads to probably more flexibility that you have now?
Yeah. I mean, so much of it was so similar, even though as athletes, yes, we focus on the reps and yes, we focus on the hard work. But man, the higher you get, especially you get to, that playing at a University of Georgia, playing in the NFL, everything is so intentional. Everything is tracked. Everything is measured. We literally have people on our staff that their entire job was just to look at the numbers and the statistics. And I didn't think about it at that time, but what a team's going to do on 1st and 10 and what their tendencies are. And what that quarterback, down to body language,
mm-hmm.
exactly how they're going to, what direction they look or how they lean on certain plays. So your level of awareness is so much higher because of the pre-work that's done and the intentionality. And then your strength coach knows exactly where they're trying to get you to. So they have you on a very strict and strategic plan, nutrition wise, strength wise. And even now they have the mental side, which they didn't have back when I played, but everything is very, very intentional. So yes, it's about the hard work, but there's a lot of structure. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it as well. As you're going through it, and then even after the fact, reviewing it and making those improvements. And I believe that directly translates, man, into improving a team, because you can have the greatest, I see companies all the time that have their mission and vision statement and the values and all those different things. But if you don't know what that means in terms of behaviors and knowing the measurables and the KPIs and what exactly makes a great, if you got XYZ vet company, right? That XYZ, what is a team player? What is a star player? What do they look like? What do those behaviors look like on a daily basis? And how does that, even down to customer service, what does that look like? What's a high standard for that?
Do you help people find almost quote unquote intangible KPIs, right? So one of the things that I'm starting to talk a lot about, Rennie, is exit planning. It ties into what James and I are doing. And the 4 capitals in a business, right? There's structural capital, which is arguably easy to measure on a KPI basis.
Yeah.
And you have human capital, social capital. Do you help people find KPIs to measure those intangibles?
Yeah, I definitely do, man. And that's something I've recently gotten into because I'm getting into the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's something that, you talk about that, immediately people think about, okay, we're just going to go hire somebody because of how they look or because of the age or whatever. And I'm like, nah, that's not the case. How can we make this something that actually moves the needle? And how can we put some KPIs and measurements to it to where it rises the tide for everybody? It improves the culture and improves the leadership. It makes everybody feel included, everybody feel welcome, and ultimately it improves the bottom line. So yeah, I have been doing a lot of that work, and it is tough in some cases because when you look at just even performance management and who gets promoted, who doesn't, that's where a lot of those KPIs and those measurements really matter when you're talking. And I just had the conversation yesterday with a couple of the employees of one of my consulting clients, but somebody's not sure of what it takes to go from being the employee to a leadership position. eventually they're going to get exhausted. They're going to get burnt out. They're going to lose that motivation to continue putting the work forward. So these things are extremely, extremely important if you're a leader.
I mean, it sounds like there's so many things here, Rennie, that like our listeners, if they could take a step back a little bit from their business, because they're in there every day and night and weekend. I mean, it's just, they truly pour so much into their profession, into their craft. I think it's a challenge for them to step back sometimes and to do a lot of the assessments we've talked about today, to really like structurally improve a lot of the things that will have, like, that investment will pay off significantly in the future. But I feel like for a lot of people, it's hard for them to, to do that. Like, what advice do you give to your business owner clients when they're trying, like, when they need to mentally understand, like, they need to step out, analyze themselves, their employees, where they are? Like, how do you have that conversation? Because I would imagine sometimes that can be a difficult conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it no doubt you have to, because I even struggle with this at times as well, man. And one of the sayings that I heard that was so profound for me is that you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And so you need that third party person sometimes to come out from an outside perspective and show you some of those blind spots. That was one of the greatest things that helped me as an athlete, was having that coach that even when I had my best game, they can evaluate me and say, man, you saw you misstep right here. You saw that your eyes weren't in the right place, or you see what you did right here. Because I'm so locked in on my performance and in that moment that I miss out on the little small details. And those little small details is what mess you up. It's not the big things. It's the little things that happen repeatedly that mess you up the most as a leader. And so I believe having that, whether it's a coach, a consultant, somebody from the outside who can come in, who's outside, who has no bias, right? Who has no ulterior motives. They just want to see you win, and they're giving you honest feedback, honest evaluation on a consistent basis. I think that is super important and a very worthy investment that could pay dividends, because it could be something as small as, like, your employees aren't that engaged, and there's so many statistics out there that talk about how, like, just small level, like how your level of engagement, it affects the bottom line, it affects productivity, it affects your ability to retain so many things. So it can be something as small as that can help you, or just your communication, how you communicate, just having somebody who can say, hey, like, you notice you said this right here, like, maybe you could have said it this way. And that may change your entire company culture, just the way you communicate to your employees or to your customers. So there's so many things that you can do, man. But it really starts with having that accountability and that awareness that you may need to acquire from somebody else.
Yeah, and I think you need to, and this is something that you've always, Rennie, had. I think this was something that was natural to you. Maybe you worked on it, but it seems like it was natural. But you've always been so humble. Like, you have to be humble to accept that.
Exactly.
Especially when you're a business owner, you're very successful. You kind of have to have a lot of those type A personality characteristics to push your business forward. But you also need at the same time to be humble enough to accept outside advice and accept, constructive criticism that will ultimately make you better.
I agree 100%, man. That really, I said that assuming that my listeners are humble, but yes, it definitely requires a lot of humility, because as a leader, especially when you are trying your best and you are going out every day, giving 100%, you care about your employees, you care about your company as your baby, you want to see it do well. It's hard hearing tough, bad feedback, or that you're not effective in a certain area. It's like, what? Like, what do you mean? Yeah. And instead of seeing this as just how somebody is experiencing you, or how, just how it's something you can change, an opportunity, you may see it as a knock on your character. You may see it as a threat to, like, your ability as a leader. So it definitely requires a lot of humility, a lot of vulnerability, and just the ability to understand that, man, where I'm at now is not where I'm going to be a month from now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
No, James, I mean, I know obviously kind of this whole thing about intentionality. We committed to Rennie to keeping this to, 30, 35 minutes. We probably keep him here all day, because this has just been great. But I also want to be sensitive to everybody's time. One thing that we've talked about, I know you've done a lot, and a lot of our listeners do, are very, like, philanthropically, like, invested. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about some of the philanthropic things you've done, but then how you think that translates into your clients and how that adds value to maybe just kind of their, their personal life and what they do? Because I think that's something that our listeners struggle with a lot, right? Like veterinary medicine, people generally choose it because they're naturally empathetic. They naturally want to help, but there's also just a financial component to what we do. So how are you intentional about being philanthropic, and how do you help your clients be intentional about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that it's always been a part of my life, man. I was a kid that, even though I went to Brookwood High School, which was known as, pretty affluent school with affluent people, both my parents, they were not doing very well. My dad lost his business during the times I was in high school. Mom was paying all the bills, paycheck to paycheck. So I really was a product of the community, just from teachers to coaches, trainers that let me train for free. And so that's something I'm always going to just naturally do is give back and everything. So that's something that I really am passionate about now for where I'm at, man. My foundation is called the Game Changers Foundation, and we help athletes become leaders through community engagement, mentorship, and leadership development. So have the 3 camps. We have a mentorship program we'll be launching that's kind of like Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And really, although I give back, there's also, like you said, there's a financial component. There's opportunities there for empowerment and collaboration. And so, for example, one of my biggest sponsors is Sports Turf. And Sports Turf provides turf fields for high schools and different, tracks, all those types of things. And so it's a great strategic partnership because not only are they helping us fulfill our mission, but we're also helping them, to improve their brand and their standing with these high schools that they want to have relationships with. So it's a very, very interdependent and very beneficial relationship. And that's how I like to do things. I don't ever like to be in a situation, nobody likes to have that person that just calls them whenever they just need something.
Yeah.
We all know that person. And I try not to be that person. So even when it comes to giving back and giving, I want to make sure that it's always, and this is something I've taken from football, a win-win situation, man, that people know, hey, if you're going to come to my organization and you're going to sponsor, you're going to be a part of what we're doing, I want to see you win too. I want to make a connection for you. I want to plug you into my ecosystem and see how we can, leverage whatever you're doing, whatever service you're providing, and help you. And that's how I like to get my clients to think as well. Like, whatever business you're doing, man, who else provides not a similar service, but who else has a similar target audience that, if you guys leverage each other, you guys can both win. So if you're a veterinarian, right, you provide veterinary services, who provides insurance, right? Who provides a product, for pets, is there a possibility for you to partner with them or for you to include them as part of that nonprofit giving, to where you put them in front of that audience and now they're benefiting? Because guess what? They're going to do the same exact thing for you. They're going to send clients your way. And so that's how I like to get my clients to think about it, man. Just think about strategic partners and who they can leverage and create those win-win opportunities.
Yeah, I love it, man. Rennie, this has been awesome. I mean, we really appreciate you spending time with us. I mean, to me, there's so many things that we just talked about that can be beneficial, whether it's having a winning mindset, being humble, stepping out and assessing yourself, developing routines, doing well by doing good, which is the concept we just talked about on the philanthropic side. I mean, I truly believe in all that stuff. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. How can, if someone listens today and they hear this podcast and say, man, this guy's awesome, I want to touch base with him, maybe we can collaborate. How do people find you? What's the best way to get in contact? And then after that, we'll have Travis ask our last question. We'll get out of here.
For sure. The easiest way to find me is through my website, renniecurran.com, RennieCurran, or through social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And so if you reach out to me, expect a message back. And, I love working with, like I said, entrepreneurs, executives, organizations that are high performing, that are trying to get to the highest level and everything. So yeah, please reach out.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, there's always kind of one question that we wrap up with, Rennie. I've got a friend that has a little sign over the toilet that says everyone wants to change the world, but no one wants to change the toilet paper. So we kind of catch everybody, have you ever been one of those guys who sneaks out with changing the toilet paper? Or, I'm guessing you're pretty disciplined, so that doesn't happen very often in your world.
Now, I've had my moments of weakness where it's late, it's late. You're just trying to get through the day, man. And you don't change the toilet paper like you should. So whatever capacity or whatever, other situation. So yeah, you have those moments and those times where you you just don't feel like it. You keep it moving. But I don't stay there. I will say that. So
Hey,
eventually
James,
I changed the
I
toilet
love it.
paper.
I think this may be the first guest that's honestly answered that he's snuck out without changing the toilet paper. Everybody else
Could be.
gets
Could be.
a little sheepish and says, no, I never do that. Well, we do finish it off by asking. So, the front end of that is, you want to change the world. How would you guide somebody who wants to change the world? Because I think a lot of people do.
I think, man, you got to start with your gifts, man. Your low-hanging fruit is what I call it. So who can you impact that's closest to you? What do you have in your tool belt right now? What are the past experiences? What have your past experiences taught you? Because we all look back over our lives, whether it's from high school or from our past job, past career, we have a blueprint. We have something that, is intangible that can add value to a certain set of individuals based off our experiences and everything. So that's where I would tell them to start, man, is really, really get clear on those assets that you have and those things that you can use to provide value that you can do in your sleep.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Rennie, it's been great catching up with you. We really appreciate you. This has been the Vet Worthwhile podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Vet Worthwhile podcast. You can find us online at signaturefd.com/signatureveterinary. And then our ask would be, if you found this episode valuable, just think of one friend or colleague that you think would enjoy the content and just please share. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Travis York is the owner of 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and a partner of SignatureFD. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors is a veterinary consulting and strategic planning firm of which SignatureFD has no involvement or ownership. James Yost is a partner and wealth advisor at SignatureFD. SignatureFD is an investment advisor registered with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and SignatureFD are not affiliated. Mr. York provides all non-investment advisory services through 3-in-1 Vet Advisors. The opinions of the guests and the contents of this podcast are intended to be educational only and should not be relied upon as investment, tax, business, or planning advice. You should consult with a professional advisor prior to taking any course of action that may impact you or your business.